Hi, welcome to Tales of Dread. One rainy night in the middle of May 2003, my friends and I were hanging out at around 9 p.m. We got to the windmill and we started the water and waited for it to fill the barrel. We were walking around looking at the local cows, but then the water started to overflow. John ran to pull out the hose. John is a professional sheep herder. This time I was going to drive. When I got in the truck, it would not start. I tried to start the truck, and I even looked under the hood to check out if there's anything out of place. Nothing. I went back into the truck. Tony had wanted to go and mess around with the cows, and so did John and Cody. While they were out there, I was trying to figure out what was wrong with the truck. Suddenly a sound so loud that I jumped up. I thought it was just the guys throwing rocks to scare the cows. So I kept on work and looked for the problem. Then I heard the sound again. I got out of the truck and yelled for the guys to stop doing that. They started to come back. When they got back to the truck, I asked them if they threw rocks to the windmill and they all said no. That's when I got the chills. Then we went back to where the cows were and Tony stayed with me this time. Then we heard the sound again. Only this time, it was harder. Tony yelled to them and told them to stop. Usually they would tell him Zaya, which is a calm down joke in Navajo language. He called them once more, but no one yelled back. This is when we started to get worried. We started walking out to the dark, looking for them. We called out their names, but no one answered. We had no flashlights. The only light we had was the moonlight, which kept coming in and out of the clouds. We could barely see where we were even going. After about 10 or some minutes we finally found them. They were on the ground almost shivering and their eyes wide open. Tony. And I thought about the worst that could happen. I mean, we have heard stories about these skinwalkers, or in Navajo, the Yana Goluchi. We have experienced encounters before, but not like this, or at least not with us out here in the open. We know what we had to do, but we didn't know if there was only one or a few more. Then we heard some scrambling noise in the bushes nearby. Tony and I were very scared at this point. But when we heard it again, but on our right and then our left and then in front of us and then finally behind us, just made us freak. It all happened in just about 3 or so seconds. The chills literally ran up our back, and I knew Tony always had some Navajo mountain tobacco or blessing cedar to protect us from these skinwalkers, but he didn't have either of them. So Tony and I made a run back to the truck with half-dead bodies of Cody and John. We heard the footsteps of something running after us. We made it back to the truck and we all got back in, and that's when it went silent. Then the witchcraft that the skinwalkers put on Cody and John wore off. All of a sudden some sickly looking coyotes jumped on the hood of the truck. There were 3 creatures that had the body of a coyote, but a little more human-like features. They could walk on all 4 of their legs or just their back legs. They had eyes that were crystal blood and red. They had the smell of dead animals, and the smell was so unbearable. We all fell back into our seat and started to scream like little girls. They started to sing or chant. We knew they were speaking in Navajo, but we were so terrified that we couldn't tell what they were saying. Then some tall, long-haired, very black creature with crystal-like eyes was just outside Tony's window, breathing heavily with the ugliest face we've ever seen. Tony looked right at it and jumped back so fast and powerful that he almost knocked out Cody. The creature blew something like powder through the window and onto us. We all started to slow our breathing and calm down, and after seconds it was quiet. We started to knock out 1x1. Next thing you know, we woke up the next day, face down butt up in Tony's bedroom. We never found out what happened to the skinwalkers, but we had a series of ceremonies that was to protect us from the sickness that the skinwalker had placed on us. The medicine man told us that the people who did this to us were after us because of jealousy. They were jealous of us because of all the things we have and all the accomplishments we've done. So we had their power turned around to backfire on them, and it was supposed to get them back with the witchcraft that they laced onto us. After we had the ceremonies, Tony went back to his house, and his mom said that night we just walked through the door about 1:30 a.m., got a glass of water and went into my room. She also said we were so quiet. She thought we were sleeping up to today. We still hang out, but we still get water and take care of the livestock, but we will never forget what happened that night when I was about 12 years old. I was driving with my father on a road from Window Rock, Arizona toward I-40 Junction near Sanders, Arizona, and this road is located on the Navajo Nation. All the reservation is trees and high desert, and houses aren't found for miles, and there isn't any electricity or running water. My dad and I were driving south, and it was snowing, and it was about 2 a.m. We were driving for roughly 40 minutes from Window Rock, and my dad and I saw a woman beside the road with no shoes and no jacket. When we saw her, she was walking about 25 feet from the road. When we saw her, she didn't even look back to see who it was or even try to hitchhike. She just kept on walking like nothing was wrong. Then my dad says, "Damn, she must be freezing." I started laughing because I thought she was drunk or something. I mean, walking in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. Then my dad pulled over for her and she was still walking, so my dad shouted in Navajo and English, "Hey, do you need a ride?" And as soon as my dad yelled, she turned around ever so slowly to look at us, and her long hair was covering her face. You couldn't even see what her face looked like. Her hair just covered her whole head like a mop head. She slowly started walking toward us, stepping on rocks and branches and snow. She walked up to the truck on the passenger side where I was just sitting, and just stood by the window for like 15 seconds just looking at me. My dad said, "Open the door, jump in the back." But as soon as I opened the door, she just took off running away into the dark forest. My dad and I were stunned because it was freezing out there and there wasn't civilization for miles. So I just closed the door and my dad closed the door. We just took off and thought, what the hell is her problem? Because she looked just like a regular person. Couple of weeks go by and my dad was visiting some of his friends who lived within 5 miles of the area, and my father just mentioned what happened to them, and their faces just looked stunned, and they had said, was her hair covering her whole head, and did she have any shoes? And my dad was like, yeah. And then that's when they told him that it wasn't a real lady, she's a ghost. My father and I didn't understand. We were like, what? But she looked like a real person. Well, my father's friends weren't surprised because the Navajos are used to hearing weird stories like that, and of course having weird encounters happen to them all over the reservation. I live in Oklahoma, but I'm from Gallup, New Mexico. My son Anthony and my daughter Alicia had just moved here in from Gallup. They found a house to rent in the same town I live in. So Auntie and I drove back to Gallup to get their stuff out of storage. It was the beginning of March and it was very windy. We pulled the horse trailer behind the pickup. It was empty on the way there, and we can only drive about 45 to 55 miles an hour without the trailer starting to swing all over the road. So a trip that normally took 11 hours. Well, you guessed it, roughly 17 hours we were traveling on I-40 west of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now there are several different Indian reservations there. It was late at night and Anthony was driving. He needed to go to the bathroom bad, so he exited at the bottom of 9 Mile Hill just west of Albuquerque. He drove behind the gas station because it was closed and there were a few semis parked in front. I told him not to stop there because I saw someone by the trash dumpster. He pulled up a little further and we looked back. There was nobody there. I figured that I was just tired and maybe seeing things. He started to get out and I told him to hurry, that something didn't feel right. He agreed after he got back in the truck. He said it felt like someone was standing behind him while he was pissing. He was afraid to look back, so he just ran fast and jumped in the truck. My son started driving west again on I-40, maybe 10 more miles down the road. He started slowing down. In the middle of the road, there was a vehicle quite a distance in front of us. We could see the brake lights and the car looked as if it were turned sideways in the middle of the road. I looked at my son and asked him what he was doing. "Hey, do you see that car?" he said. I looked again and it was driving perfectly down the road like it had never stopped. I told my son to pull over to the side of the road. I asked him if he was tired and he replied, yes. So we both got out of truck to switch places. I walked around the front of the truck and Anthony walked around the back and stepped over the tongue of the trailer. Right when I was getting in on the driver's side, a car passed by. I glanced at it as it drove by. At the end of the car, on the pavement, right by the tail lights, was a man. He was hunched over on all fours, feet and hands on the ground. He was covered with a buckskin. It almost looked as if he had jumped off the back of that car right as it passed us. The next second he was gone. I thought I had to be seeing things. It was late and I was getting really tired now. My son got in on the other side and I started driving down the road. I didn't say anything about what I saw, but I glanced in my rear-view mirror to see if the trailer was keeping steady. I didn't want to get out of control. When I glanced back I noticed something flapping in the wind off the trailer. It looked as if it were the bottom of a jacket or maybe the bottom of the buckskin I saw draped over the man in the road. Then I asked Anthony if he had seen the man in the road behind the car. He said yes and explained to me what he saw. He then asked me if I had seen a man leaning against the back of the trailer, but I said no, that I hadn't looked in the mirror on that side. Anthony said that when he was getting in on the passenger side he had glanced at the back of the trailer and saw a man leaning against it. He said his face was hidden but he could see blue glowing around his face. He described it as the color of the blue that you see when you light up a cell phone. I then told Anthony that there was something on the back of the trailer or maybe even on the tongue of the trailer at this point. Anthony eventually fell asleep, but I kept paying attention to the rear view mirror instead of the road. In the mirror I could see a shadow of 3 stick-like fingers. At one point I almost missed a curve in the road. It was a good thing that I was driving slowly because there was a good 100-yard drop-off on that curve. We made it to Gallup around 3 or 4 a.m. I woke up my son to go unlock the gate at his dad's house, and when I opened the door the cab light came on. It was flickering as if someone was moving their hand back and forth underneath it. Anthony saw it too. I lifted the seat to get our stuff out of the back and I noticed that the seat was down in the extended part of the cab when we left on our trip. The seat was up and can't be put down unless someone is releasing a lever from both sides of the pickup. We went in the house and we went to bed. The next day we loaded up the trailer and drove back to Oklahoma. When it started getting dark, I looked in my rearview mirror and I could see the side of the trailer perfectly from the brake light of the truck. The night before, I couldn't see a brake light reflection at all. So whatever was riding with us was on the back of the bumper, covering up the tail light. Anthony's theory was that a skinwalker saw us pulled over on the side of the road and knew we were tired and was going to try to make us wreck. He thinks that the light flickering inside of the pickup and the seat in the back being down was his grandmother that had recently passed away. Anthony was very close to her and he felt that she was protecting us from the skinwalker. I would visit my grandmother at her home on the Navajo reservation for several weeks every summer. Every so often my grandmother would hire a worker to do odd jobs around her house and property. Well, one evening, right before the sun went down, I was asked by my grandmother to take him home, which was about 4 miles out of the valley where she lived. We headed back down the road to grandmother's. As I mentioned before, it was evening and the sky was a deep red as the sun began to set behind us. We were leaving a nice dust trail from the dirt road and the radio, was playing music from the only radio station that could be picked up from the nearest town of Holbrook. There was nothing unusual, nothing weird. It was at this time that my eye caught movement of something in the bushes a little up the road to the right of us. I remember slowing down, thinking that it was one of the many free-roaming sheep in the area, and they would dart out in front of the truck as I passed where I thought I saw it. I sped up thinking nothing else of it. But then out of nowhere, I just felt this dark feeling of fear and dread. I had no idea why I was feeling this way, but I definitely felt that something was wrong. As I play this memory back in my mind, there are only a few clear memories that I have of that evening. I distinctively remember that this thing was only getting closer as my brother cried, "It's coming up on your side." I remember being as scared as hell and thinking that I didn't want to die at the moment, that I thought would be our last. I remember speeding around a bend in the road and seeing a car coming toward us in the opposite direction. At that moment I felt instant relief and felt that whatever was following us was now gone, shaken up, but alive. We made it to grandmother's house, wondering what the hell had just happened. We ran inside, not looking back, hoping that whatever was chasing us had not followed us home. As we told my grandmother about our experience, she didn't seem to surprise, which surprised us. And as a matter of fact, I never drove on the reservation at night again until I was 21 without going too deep into explanation. I'll just say that these skinwalkers are evil men and spirits that use black magic for evil doing. I believe that if God and his greatness are real and the devil is equally as real and also has his ways of showing himself,